He called my husband a beggar. He laughed at his $5 shoes. Today, my son lives in a basement. And my husband. He just bought the building. It started at the altar. My only child poured red wine on my white dress. He told 400 guests that I was marrying trash. He thought he was untouchable. He thought we were weak. But he made one fatal mistake. He didn't check who he was insulting. He didn't know that the old man in the cheap suit was actually a billionaire. What happened next isn't just revenge. It is justice. And you need to see every second of it. They say that when your heart breaks, it makes a sound only you can hear. Like a high-tension wire snapping in the dead of winter. A sharp, violent crack that reverberates through your bones, leaving you deaf to the world around you. I heard that sound today, but it wasn't my heart breaking. No, that is what a younger, weaker woman would have felt. The woman I was yesterday would have felt heartbreak. The woman standing at this altar right now feels something entirely different. I feel the cold, wet slide of vintage Merlot soaking through the ivory silk of my wedding dress. I feel the fabric clinging to my thigh, heavy and ruined. It looks like blood against the pristine white of the lace. The dark red stain is spreading, inch by inch. A map of humiliation drawn by my own son. The silence in the cathedral is absolute. 400 people are sitting in the pews behind me. I can feel their eyes. 400 pairs of eyes burning into my back. Some are wide with shock. Some are narrowed with pity. But the ones in the front row, the ones that belong to my daughter-in-law's family, they are dancing with amusement. I can hear the soft rustle of silk as they lean forward, like vultures sensing a carcass, eager to see if the old woman will cry, eager to see if the mother will finally crumble. I don't crumble. I stand frozen. My hand still gripping the bouquet of white roses so tightly that the thorns are piercing through my gloves. I can feel a single drop of blood from my palm mixing with the sweat on my skin. The pain is grounding. It is the only real thing in this nightmare. Slowly, very slowly. I raise my eyes. I look at him. Jason, my son. My only child. The boy I carried for 9 months. The boy I worked 3 jobs to feed. The boy whose fevered forehead I kissed on sleepless nights. He is standing 3 feet away from me, right in the center of the aisle. He is holding an empty crystal champagne flute, his fingers loose and arrogant around the stem. He isn't sorry. That is the detail that freezes the air in my lungs. If there was horror in his eyes, if this had been an accident, a stumble, a clumsy mistake, I would have forgiven him. I am a mother. Forgiveness is the language we speak fluently, even when we shouldn't. But Jason is not horrified. He is smirking. It is a small, cruel twist of his lips. A smile that doesn't reach his eyes. His eyes are glazed, not just with the expensive scotch he's been drinking since 10 this morning, but with contempt. Pure, unfiltered contempt. He looks at me not as the woman who gave him life, but as a nuisance, an embarrassment, an obstacle to his inheritance. The smell of the wine is overpowering. It smells sharp, acidic, mixing with the heavy scent of the expensive lilies arrangements I paid for with my life savings. It smells like money wasted. It smells like betrayal. Oops, Jason says. The word hangs in the dead air. It is flat monotone. It echoes off the high vaulted ceilings of the church. Look at you, Mom, he continues, his voice slurring just enough to be noticeable, loud enough to reach the back row. You're a mess. But then again, this whole wedding is a mess, isn't it? He laughs. It's a dry, hacking sound. My husband, my new husband, Arthur steps forward. I can feel the heat radiating off him. Arthur is a gentle man. In the 6 months we have known each other, I have never seen him raise his voice. I have never seen him clench a fist. He is the man who stops to move turtles off the road. He is the man who tips the waitress 50% because he knows her feet hurt. But right now, Arthur is vibrating. I glance at him sideways. His jaw is set so hard I can see the muscle twitching beneath his gray beard. His hands, calloused from 40 years of honest labor, are balled up at his sides. He looks at Jason, and for the first time, I see something dangerous in Arthur's eyes. Not violence. Something scarier. Judgment? Hush, Jason, Arthur says. His voice is low, a rumble of thunder before the storm. That is enough. Jason's smirk widens. He turns his gaze to Arthur, looking him up and down. He scans Arthur's suit, the one we bought at a discount outlet because we wanted to save money for the catering. He looks at Arthur's shoes, polished. Yes, but old. The leather is cracked at the toes. Jason sneers. Enough. I think I'll decide when it's enough, old man. You're standing there in a suit that costs less than the wine I just spilled, pretending you belong here. Pretending you're not just some charity case my mother picked up to feel useful. A gasp ripples through the room. It sounds like the air being sucked out of the church. I see my best friend Sarah in the second row. Her hands are covering her mouth. She is crying. She knows. She knows how much this day meant to me. She knows how many nights I spent alone eating dinner in front of the television, wishing for someone to ask me how my day was. She knows that Arthur was the miracle I didn't think I deserved. And she sees what my son is doing to that miracle. My chest feels tight, like an iron band is constricting my ribs. I can't breathe. The stain on my dress feels like it's burning. It's hot. Searing dot, every sacrifice I ever made for that boy is flashing before my eyes. Not as a movie, but as a ledger. A balance sheet of love that is now deeply in the red. I remember selling my grandmother's ring to pay for his college tuition. He never said thank you. I remember wearing shoes with holes in the soles for 2 winters so he could have the latest sneakers. He threw them away when they got a scuff. I remember the second job, the third job, the missing years. I gave him my youth. I gave him my health. I gave him my future, and he just poured wine on it. He thinks I am weak. That is the mistake he is making. He looks at me and sees the mother who always caved. The mother who always apologized for things she didn't do just to keep the peace. The mother who was so afraid of being alone that she let her son treat her like a servant in her own life. He sees a victim. He doesn't realize that the woman standing here, with wine dripping down her skirt and thorns digging into her palm, has died. She died the moment that liquid hit the silk dot. Something else is taking her place. It starts in my stomach. A heat, a fire. It rises up my throat, choking off the tears that were threatening to fall. I swallow them. They taste bitter. They taste like steel. I unlock my knees. I stand taller. I am only 5'4", but in this moment, I feel like a giant. I release the grip on my bouquet. It falls to the floor with a soft thud, scattering white petals onto the marble. I don't look at the guests. I don't look at the priest who is staring at us with his mouth slightly open, clutching his Bible like a shield. I look only at him. Jason. He sees the change. I catch the flicker of confusion in his eyes. He was expecting tears. He was expecting me to run away, to hide in the bathroom and sob while he and his wife laughed over fresh champagne. He was expecting the poor mom show. He wasn't expecting the silence. The church is so quiet now that I can hear the hum of the electric candles. I can hear the wind beating against the stained glass. Windows high above us. I take a step forward. My heel clicks against the stone floor. A sharp, singular sound. Jason takes a half step back. Instinct. He doesn't even know why he did it, Mom, he says. But the arrogance wavers just for a fraction of a second. Don't make a scene. You're already embarrassing yourself. I take another step. The rage is gone. That's the strangest part. The shaking has stopped. The heat has cooled into something solid. Something unbreakable. It feels like ice. It feels like clarity. I reach up and slowly peel off my white gloves. They are stained with the blood from the thorns. I drop them on top of the ruined bouquet. You're right, Jason, I say. My voice is not loud. I don't need to shout. The acoustics of the church carry my words to every single corner of the room. It is a voice I haven't heard in 20 years. It is the voice of the matriarch. This wedding is a mess. I look him dead in the eye. But we are going to clean it up. Right now. The air in the cathedral was thick, stagnant. It smelled of centuries-old incense and fresh. Nervous sweat, but mostly smelled of him, my son. He stood so close to me now that I could smell the layers of his arrogance. It was a suffocating mix of aged Scotch, stale cigarettes, and a cologne that I knew cost $400 a bottle. I knew the price, because I was the one who bought it for him last Christmas. I watched him inhale. His chest expanded. He was wearing a suit that was a masterpiece of Italian tailoring. Charcoal gray. Silk blend. It caught the light from the chandeliers and shimmered, almost like shark skin. The fabric didn't wrinkle. It didn't fold. It draped over his body with a terrifying perfection, accentuating his shoulders, slimming his waist. It was a suit of armor made of money. I remembered the day he bought it. He had sent me a picture. Investment dressing, he had called it. He needed it for meetings. He needed it to impress clients. He needed $3,000 transferred to his account within the hour, or the tailor would lose his appointment slot. I transferred the money. I ate instant noodles for a month. Now that $3,000 investment was looming over me. Jason adjusted his cuff. The movement was deliberate, slow, calculated to draw the eye. The gold flashed. A Rolex Submariner, heavy, ostentatious. It ticked away the seconds of my humiliation with a silent, sweeping grace. The metal was cold and hard, just like the eyes of the man wearing it. He tapped the crystal face of the watch with a manicured fingernail. Tick, tick, tick. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me. He was looking at Arthur. I felt Arthur stiffen beside me. I didn't need to look to know what Jason was seeing. I knew every thread of Arthur's outfit. I knew the story behind every seam. We had found the tuxedo at a Goodwill on the south side of the city 3 weeks ago. Arthur had pulled it from the rack with a reverence that broke my heart. It smelled faintly of lavender detergent and someone else's memories. The black fabric was a little shiny at the elbows, worn down by years of friction. The lapels were slightly too wide, a style that had died 20 years ago. It's perfect, Ellie, Arthur had said, holding it up against his chest in the fluorescent aisle of the thrift store. Look, it's my size. And it's only $40. That leaves us budget for the flowers. He had smiled then. A smile of genuine relief. He didn't care about the fashion. He cared about marrying me. He cared about saving our money for our life together. But standing here now, under the unforgiving gaze of my son, the tuxedo looked pathetic. It looked tired. The shoulder pads were a little lumpy. The hem of the trousers was a fraction of an inch too short, revealing the socks. And the shoes, God, the shoes. Jason's eyes dropped to the floor. He stared at Arthur's feet. Arthur was wearing his best pair of dress shoes. He had owned them for 10 years. He had spent 2 hours last night polishing them at the kitchen table. I could still hear the rhythmic sound of the brush. Scrub, scrub, scrub. He had tried so hard to buff out the scratches. He had used a black marker to color in the cracks in the leather where the polish wouldn't stick. But under the bright lights of the altar, the marker looked purple. The cracks looked like canyons. The leather was warped, shaped by a decade of hard work, of walking to bus stops, of standing on concrete floors. They were the shoes of a man who worked. Jason was wearing loafers that looked like they had never touched a dirty sidewalk. The leather was soft as butter. The soles were pristine. Jason let out a breath. It was a sound of pure disgust. Vintage, Jason said. The word dripped from his mouth like poison. He took a step toward Arthur. He invaded his space. He stood so close that Arthur had to fight the urge to step back. Jason circled him, like a buyer inspecting a used car, like a predator toying with a wounded animal. I have to ask, Jason said, his voice loud, carrying to the back pews. Is this a costume party? Did I miss the memo? Because I'm pretty sure the invitation said black tie, not dumpster dive. A giggle rippled from the front row. It was Tasha, my daughter-in-law. I glanced at her. She was wearing a red dress that was too tight, too short, and too loud. She was covering her mouth with a hand adorned with acrylic nails the size of talons. Her shoulders were shaking. She found this funny. She found my husband's poverty hilarious. Jason turned back to me, pointing a finger at Arthur's chest. He poked the worn lapel of the tuxedo. "Look at this, Mom," Jason sneered. "Just look at it. You can see the threads coming loose. It smells like— what is that?" "Mothballs." Desperation. Arthur didn't move. He stared straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the stained glass window above the altar. He was maintaining his dignity, but I could see his hands trembling at his sides. I could see the red flush creeping up his neck. He was ashamed. Not for himself, but for me. He was ashamed that his lack of money was giving my son ammunition. "It's a perfectly good suit," I said. My voice was shaking, but not from fear. From a rage so hot it felt like lava in my throat. "Good." Jason laughed. He looked at the crowd. He spread his arms wide, inviting them to join in the joke. "She says it's good. Ladies and gentlemen, look at the groom. Look at the shoes. I wouldn't let my gardener wear those to mow the lawn." He looked back at Arthur's feet. "Did you find them in the trash?" Jason asked. His voice dropped lower, becoming more vicious. "Or did you take them off a corpse? Because they look dead, Arthur. Just like your bank account." The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed down on my shoulders. I looked at the scuff on Arthur's left shoe. I remembered how he got it. He got it helping a neighbor move a refrigerator. He had scuffed his best shoes because he couldn't say no to someone who needed help. Then I looked at Jason's pristine loafers. He had never helped anyone in his life. He paid people to help him. He paid people to clean his messes. He paid people to raise his children. "Money?" Jason whispered, leaning in close to Arthur's face. "It's about respect, Arthur. How can you expect to take care of my mother when you can't even afford a new pair of shoes? How can you protect her? You look weak. You look ... cheap." He spat the word. "Cheap ... It hung in the air between us." Jason straightened up. He brushed an invisible speck of dust off his $3,000 sleeve. He checked his reflection in the gold communion plate on the table. He adjusted his silk tie. He looked perfect. He looked successful. He looked like everything society tells us a man should be, and he was empty. He was a hollow shell wrapped in expensive fabric. Arthur, in his $40 suit and his cracked shoes, was full. He was full of kindness. He was full of integrity. He was full of love. But Jason couldn't see that. He was blind to everything that didn't have a price tag. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a money clip. It was thick with cash, hundreds, fifties. He peeled off a crisp $100 bill. He held it out to Arthur. 2 fingers, dismissive, like he was tipping a valet. "Here," Jason said. "Go buy yourself some shoe polish. Maybe a new tie. Try to look like you belong in the same room as us." Arthur didn't take the money. He didn't even blink. The bill fluttered to the floor. It landed on the stone, right next to the white rose petals and the blood-stained gloves. Jason looked at the money on the floor. Then he looked at me. He smiled. A wolfish, predatory smile. He thought he had one. He thought he had crushed us. He reached for another glass of champagne from a passing waiter who had frozen in the aisle. He raised the glass high. The crystal caught the light. "You know," Jason announced, turning his back on us to address the crowd, "this brings me to a realization." He paused for effect. He loved the sound of his own voice. He loved the attention. "We need to be honest about what is happening here today." I felt the air pressure drop. A storm was coming. The insults about the suit were just the warm-up. The attacks on the shoes were just the opening jabs. He was winding up for the knockout blow. I looked at Arthur's profile. He was closing his eyes. He was praying. Not for himself. He was praying for Jason. I wasn't praying, I was plotting. Jason took a sip of the champagne. He swallowed. He cleared his throat. "Friends, family, unwelcome guests," Jason began, his voice booming with false conviviality. "Let me propose a toast. To the happy couple." He paused. His eyes found mine. They were cold, dead. "And to the biggest mistake my mother has ever made." She raised the glass higher. The liquid swirled, golden and bubbly. He opened his mouth to deliver the words that would end his life as he knew it. He opened his mouth to shatter the last remnants of my love. I clenched my fists. I waited. The world narrowed down to the movement of his lips. He was about to say it. He was about to call him trash. The sound of the silver spoon hitting the crystal glass was sharp, violent. Ting, ting, ting. It pierced the silence of the cathedral. Like a needle hitting bone. Jason stood in the center of the aisle. He held the champagne flute high. The golden liquid caught the light from the stained glass windows, casting a warped yellow shadow across his face. He looked like a king addressing his subjects. He looked like a predator circling a trap. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Arthur. He looked at the 400 guests. "I'd like to say a few words," Jason announced. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. It had the polished, slippery texture of a serpent moving through oil. About ... standards. He took a slow, deliberate sip of the champagne. He swallowed loud enough for the microphone to catch it. A wet, guttural sound. "My father," Jason began, and the mention of his late father made my heart stutter. "My father was a great man. He built a legacy. He worked 18 hours a day so that we ... could live with dignity." He paused. He let the word dignity hang in the air. He let it float up to the vaulted ceiling and drift back down like ash. "He wore Italian silk," Jason continued, his eyes finally sliding over to Arthur. "He drove German cars. He understood the value of things. He understood that what you wear, where you live, and who you associate with, it says everything about who you are." Arthur didn't move. He stood like a statue carved from gray stone. But I could feel the heat coming off him. It was the heat of shame. The heat of a man being dissected alive in front of strangers. Jason took a step closer. He invaded the altar. He stepped onto the holy ground where we were supposed to say our vows. The priest took a breath to speak, to intervene, but Jason silenced him with a single, sharp look. A look that said, "I am the one with the money here." "And now?" Jason whispered into the microphone. "Now we have this." He gestured to Arthur with his free hand. A lazy, dismissive wave, like he was shooing away a stray dog. "My mother," Jason said, his voice dripping with fake pity. "Poor, sweet, senile Ellie. She thinks she's found love. She thinks she's found a second chance." T laughed. A short bark of a sound. "But let's be honest, everyone. Let's stop pretending." He turned to the front row. To Tasha, to her parents, the Jenkins family. They were leaning forward, their eyes glittering with malice. They were hungry for this. They fed on humiliation like it was caviar. "Look at him," Jason commanded. "Look at the man standing where my father used to stand." He pointed the champagne glass at Arthur's face. "He lives in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. I checked. It smells like bleach and fried onions. He drives a rusted sedan with 200,000 miles on it. He clips coupons. He buys his clothes at charity shops." Jason shook his head, feigning sadness. "This isn't a marriage, Mom. This is a rescue mission. You picked up a stray animal because you were lonely. You found something broken on the side of the road and you decided to bring it home." The air in the room was gone. Sucked out. No one breathed. No one moved. The silence was absolute. It was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums until they roared. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run at him and slap the glass from his hand. But my limbs were frozen. The shock was a physical weight, pinning me to the floor. "Stop it," I whispered. My voice was a ghost. "Jason, stop." He ignored me. He was enjoying this too much. The cruelty was a drug, and he was high on it. "And you want me to call him Dad?" Jason asked. He chuckled, looking at Tasha. "You want my children to call him Grandpa?" Tasha stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the stone floor. Scree, a sound like nails, on a chalkboard. She smoothed her red dress. She tossed her black hair. She walked to stand beside her husband, a united front of hatred. "That's right, Ellie," Tasha said. Her voice was higher, sharper. It cut through the air like a serrated knife. "It's embarrassing, really. We tried to tell you. We tried to warn you." She looked at Arthur. She looked at him with the same expression she used when she stepped in gum on the sidewalk. "Look at him," Tasha spat. "He's shaking. He knows he doesn't belong here. He knows he's a fraud. He's a good man," I said. My voice was rising. The ice in my chest was cracking. "He is kind. He loves me." "Love?" Jason scoffed. "He loves your life insurance policy, Mom. He loves the house Dad paid for. He loves the idea of not dying alone in that dump. He calls an apartment." Jason turned back to Arthur. He stepped right into his face. I could see the spittle flying from Jason's lips. "You're a leech," Jason hissed. "A parasite. You found a vulnerable old woman and you latched on." Arthur looked Jason in the eye. His expression was calm, sad but calm. "I love your mother," Arthur said softly. "That is all. Don't speak to me." Jason roared. The sudden volume made the front row jump. "You don't get to speak to me. You don't get to look at me." Jason turned to the crowd. He raised the glass one final time. "So here is my toast," he bellowed. "To my mother, who has clearly lost her mind." He poured the rest of the champagne onto the floor. It splashed onto Arthur's worn shoes. It soaked into the cracked leather and to this ... thing. He pointed at Arthur. "He isn't a stepfather," Jason said. The words came out slow, enunciated, every syllable a weapon. "He isn't family. He isn't even a man." He leaned in close to the microphone. The feedback wind. A high-pitched screech. "He is trash." The word hit the room like a bomb. Trash. It echoed off the stone walls. "Trash, trash, trash. Trash, garbage," Tasha added, her voice gleeful. "Street trash that you picked up because you were desperate." "Trash," screamed Tasha's father from the third row. He was laughing. A wheezing, wet laugh. "Trash. Take out the trash." Someone else yelled from the Jenkins side. Laughter erupted. It started as a giggle from Tasha's mother. Then it spread. The cousins. The uncles. The friends they had brought. It grew into a roar. A cacophony of mockery. They were pointing. They were slapping their knees. They were pulling out their phones to record the spectacle. Click, flash, record. The sound of their laughter was hideous. It sounded like hyenas tearing into meat. It sounded like the end of the world. Arthur stood there, the champagne soaking his socks, the insults raining down on him. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, profoundly, deeply disappointed. He reached out and took my hand. His palm was warm, rough, calloused. It was the hand of a man who built things. It was the hand of a man who held me when I cried. It was the hand of a man who was worth 10 of my son, and in that moment stood listening to the laughter of my family, watching my son sneer at the man I loved. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a little snap. It was a break. A clean, catastrophic break. The cord that tied me to Jason, the umbilical cord of guilt and obligation and unconditional motherly love. It severed. I looked at my son. I didn't see the baby I nursed. I didn't see the toddler I taught to walk. I didn't see the boy I cheered for at graduation. I saw a stranger. A cruel, shallow, hateful stranger. The heat in my chest turned white, blinding, pure. I squeezed Arthur's hand. I squeezed it so hard my knuckles turned white. I let go of the altar rail. I took a breath. The air tasted like ozone. It tasted like a storm. The silence that followed the laughter was heavy. They were waiting for me to cry. They were waiting for me to run, but I wasn't running. I turned to face my son. My movements were slow, mechanical. I looked at the Rolex. I looked at the Italian suit. I looked at the empty, soulless eyes. "Trash?" I whispered. Jason stopped laughing. He frowned. "What?" I took a step toward him. "You called him trash," I said louder. My voice was steady. It was steel. I reached out and took the microphone from the stand. The sound of my hand gripping the metal was loud in the speakers. Thump. I looked at the 400 people. I looked at the laughing faces of the Jenkins family. I looked at Tasha's smirk. Then I looked back at Jason. You want to talk about trash, Jason? I asked. I pointed to the exit doors at the back of the church, the massive oak doors that led to the street. Then let's talk about taking it out. The air in the cathedral shifted. It didn't just change. It broke. The laughter from the front row died down, sputtering out like a candle deprived of oxygen. They realized, finally, that I wasn't crying. They realized I wasn't shrinking. They realized that the old woman, the punchline of their cruel joke, was staring back, and I wasn't blinking. The smell of the spilled champagne was acidic. Now pungent. It smelled like fermentation and rot. It smelled like the decay of a relationship I had spent 30 years trying to keep alive. I released Arthur's hand. I needed to do this alone. I smoothed the silk of my dress over my hips. I felt the stain wet and cold against my skin, but it didn't feel like shame anymore. It felt like war paint. It felt like a battle scar. I took the microphone from the stand. The metal was cold against my palm, heavy. It felt like a gavel. You think you know the truth? I said. My voice was low. It rumbled through the speakers, vibrating in the floorboards beneath our feet. It wasn't the voice of a mother. It was the voice of a judge. You think you're the one telling the story? I continued, locking eyes with Jason. But you are just a child playing with fire. Jason rolled his eyes. He checked his Rolex again. A nervous tick. Oh, save the speech, Mom, he groaned. Just sign the annulment papers and go home. We're bored? I asked. I stepped off the altar. I walked down the 3 marble steps. Doc, click, click. The sound of my heels was like gunshots in the quiet church. I stopped 2 feet from him. I was close enough to see the sweat beading on his upper lip. I was close enough to see the sudden flicker of doubt in his eyes. He had never seen me like this. He had only ever seen the mother who cooked his meals, the mother who paid his debts, the mother who smiled when he insulted her because she was desperate for a crumb of his affection. That mother was dead. You are bored, I repeated. Let me entertain you then. Let me tell you a story. I looked at Tasha. She had crossed her arms over her chest, trying to look bored. But her foot was tapping nervously. Tap, tap, tap. 5 years, I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on my son. I spent 35 years scrubbing floors. My knees are permanently swollen. My hands, I held them up. They were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through my blood. My hands are twisted with arthritis. Why? So you could wear that suit, Jason. So you could go to that private school where you learned to look down on people like me. Jason scoffed. He looked around for support. Here we go. The martyr act. No, I cut him off. Sharp. Not a martyr. An investor. I invested everything in you. My time, my money, my youth. And I foolishly thought, that I was raising a good man. I looked at Arthur. He was watching me with awe. He didn't try to stop me. He respected me enough to let me fight my own battle. But I didn't raise a man, I whispered, leaning in close to Jason. I raised a bank account with a heartbeat. Jason flinched. His face turned a blotchy red. You take that back. Why? I asked. Is it a lie? When was the last time you called me, Jason? Not to ask for money. Not to ask for a babysitter, but just to ask how I was. He opened his mouth, closed it. He couldn't answer. The silence was the answer. Last Christmas, I asked, no, you were in Aspen. My birthday. No, you sent a text. HBD, 3 letters. That was what my life was worth to you. I turned to Tasha. She shrank back against the pew. And you? I said. You call my husband trash. You? I laughed. It was a cold, jagged sound. You borrowed $3,000 from me last month for that handbag? You said it was for bills. You lied to my face, and you never paid it back." The crowd gasped. I saw heads turn toward Tasha's designer bag sitting on the pew. She grabbed it, pulling it onto her lap like she could hide the evidence. "That," I pointed at the bag, "that is my money. That dress is my money. This wedding, this entire circus, is my money." I turned back to Jason. He looked smaller now. The suit didn't look like armor anymore. It looked like a costume he was too small to fill. "You asked me why I chose Arthur," I said. My voice softened, but it wasn't gentle. It was dangerous. "You mocked his shoes. You mocked his apartment." I walked back to Arthur. I stood beside him. I didn't touch him. I didn't need to. We were a unit. A fortress. "Arthur has never asked me for a dime," I said. "When I was sick last winter, when I had the flu and couldn't get out of bed, ... you didn't even call. Arthur sat by my bed for 3 days. He made me soup. He changed my sheets. He read to me. I looked at Arthur's worn shoes. He walked 5 miles in the snow to get my medicine because his car wouldn't start. He walked in these shoes, these trash shoes." I looked up at my son. The anger in my chest was a roaring inferno now. It consumed the guilt. It consumed the fear. "That isn't trash, Jason. That is a king." Arthur's eyes filled with tears. He stood taller. "And you?" I looked Jason up and down. "You are a boy playing dress up. You are hollow. You are empty." "Mom, stop," Jason said. His voice cracked. He looked around the room, realizing he was losing the audience. "You're humiliating me." "I am narrating you," I corrected. "There is a difference." I took a deep breath. The air felt clean in my lungs. For the first time in years, I wasn't suffocating under the weight of his expectations. "You said I had to choose," I said. "You said I couldn't have you and him. You gave me an ultimatum." Jason nodded, regaining a shred of confidence. "That's right. It's him or us, Mom. You want to see your grandkids. You want to be part of this family. Then you get rid of the trash." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the greed. I saw the selfishness. I saw the absolute lack of empathy. And then I looked at Arthur. I saw the love. I saw the patience. I saw the man who made me feel like I was 20 again. The choice wasn't hard. It wasn't even a choice. "'Kay?" I said. Jason smiled. He thought he had one. He thought the threat of losing the grandchildren had worked, just like it always did. He stepped forward, opening his arms for a hug. "I knew you'd see reason, Mom," he said. "Come on, let's get you out of here. We can annul this by Monday." Didn't move. I let him take a step. Then another. When he was within reaching distance, I raised the microphone one last time. "I choose him," I said. Jason froze. His arms dropped. "What?" "I choose Arthur," I repeated. Louder. "I choose the man who loves me. I choose the man who respects me." I pointed a finger at Jason's chest. "And I reject you." The words hung in the air, heavy, final. "You are not my son right now," I said. "My son would never treat a human being the way you just treated Arthur. My son was kind. My son had a heart. I don't know who you are, but you are a stranger to me." "You can't do this," Tasha shrieked. "We are your family." "Family?" I spun on her. "Family doesn't behave like this. Family doesn't laugh when you are bleeding. You aren't family. You are parasites." I turned to the security guard standing in the corner. A large man named Marcus, who had been watching the scene with folded arms. I had hired him just in case. I never thought I would need him for this. "Marcus," I said. He stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am." I looked at my son. I looked at the daughter-in-law who hated me. I looked at the in-laws who mocked me. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Just one. It wasn't for me. It was for the little boy Jason used to be. It was a funeral tear for a relationship that was already dead. "Remove them," I said. Jason's jaw dropped. "Mom, remove them all," I commanded. My voice rang out like a bell. "Get them out of my church. Get them out of my wedding. And get them out of my life. You're crazy, Jason yelled. You're kicking out your own son. For him. For a nobody. He is not a nobody, I said. I looked at Arthur. He squeezed my hand. And neither am I finished. I turned my back on my son. I faced the altar. I faced the cross. Behind me, the chaos erupted. But I didn't turn around. I listened to the sounds of their protests. I listened to the scuffling of feet. And then I heard the sound I had been waiting for. I heard the heavy oak doors of the cathedral. Opening, creak, and then slam. They were gone. The silence returned. But this time it wasn't heavy. It wasn't oppressive. It was peaceful. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war is won. I looked at Arthur. He was smiling. A real smile. Are you okay? He whispered. No, I admitted. But I will be. I didn't know then what was about to happen. I didn't know that the man standing next to me was hiding a secret that would shake the foundations of the city. I thought the drama was over. I was wrong. Arthur reached into his pocket. Ellie, he said, his voice trembling slightly. There is something I need to tell you. He wasn't reaching for a tissue. He wasn't reaching for a ring. He pulled out a phone. A very expensive, very secure satellite phone. Don't be mad, he said. And that was when the sound of the helicopter blades started to chop through the air. The heavy oak doors of the cathedral didn't just open. They groaned. A deep, mournful sound that signaled the end of the spectacle. Marcus, the head of security, moved like a shadow. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply walked down the center aisle, his footsteps heavy and rhythmic. Thud, 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 He was a mountain of a man. 6'5", shoulders like boulders. He wore a black suit that fit him properly, unlike the costume my son was wearing. Marcus didn't look angry. He looked like a professional. He looked like a man who took out the trash for a living. 2 other guards flanked him. They moved in perfect unison. A phalanx of order descending upon chaos. The change in the room was instantaneous. A moment ago. The Jenkins family, Tasha's parents, her cousins, her screeching aunts, had been a pack of hyenas. They had been laughing, pointing, feeling the power of their cruelty. But hyenas are cowards. They only attack when they sense weakness. Now, seeing the guards approach, they shrank. Tasha's father, Ari, the man who had yelled, "Trash," just seconds ago, suddenly found his shoes very interesting. His face, usually flushed with cheap wine and arrogance, turned a pale, sickly dough color. He pulled his collar away from his neck. He was sweating. I could smell it from here. The sour, metallic scent of sudden fear. Tasha's mother stopped jingling her gold bracelets. She clutched her purse to her chest, her eyes darting toward the exit like a trapped animal. They were vipers. But vipers have no fangs when you take away their poison. Marcus stopped in front of Jason. He didn't say a word. He just stood there. A silent wall of muscle. Jason tried to laugh. It came out as a squeak. "This is ridiculous," Jason stammered, looking around for support that wasn't there. "You can't touch me. I'm the groom's stepson. I paid for the SPE." Stopped. He realized he hadn't paid for anything. "I had, sir," Marcus said. His voice was gravel. "You have 5 seconds to walk. Or I drag you. You don't touch me," Jason shouted. He tried to puff out his chest. He tried to summon the entitlement that had protected him his whole life. "Do you know who I am? I drive a Porsche." Marcus moved. It was a blur. One hand clamped onto Jason's upper arm. It wasn't violent. It was absolute. It was the grip of a vice. Jason yelped. "Ow! Hey! That's an Italian suit." "Walk?" Marcus said. And then the procession began. It was the longest walk of Jason's life. The center aisle of the cathedral was 50 yards long. 50 yards of marble. 50 yards of judgment. Marcus marched him forward. Tasha scrambled behind them, her high heels clicking frantically on the stone. Click, clack, click, clack. She looked like a rat fleeing. A sinking ship. Her family followed a disorganized, shuffling mess of people, trying to disappear into their own collars. The guests turned their heads. 400 people watched, and they began to whisper. It started as a low hum, like bees in a hive. Then it grew. About time I heard my neighbor Mrs. Gable whisper, "Did you see his face?" Someone else murmured, "Disgraceful." The whispers were a physical thing. They washed over Jason. I saw his ears turn bright red. He kept his head down, staring at the floor, but he couldn't block out the sound of his own social execution. He had wanted an audience for my humiliation. Now he was the show. They reached the great doors. The light from the afternoon sun spilled in, blindingly bright against the dim interior of the church. Jason stopped. He dug his heels in. He fought against Marcus's grip just for a second. He turned back. He looked at me across the distance of the church. He looked at Arthur standing beside me, his face twisted. It wasn't regret I saw. It wasn't sadness. It was pure distilled hate. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to leave a scar that would never heal. He knew he had lost the battle of money. So he went for the heart. "You think you won?" Jason screamed. His voice cracked, echoing off the stone walls. "You think this is over?" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You will never see them again, Mom. Never. You say goodbye to Miles. You say goodbye to Chloe." The air left my lungs. Miles, my sweet 6-year-old grandson with the gap-toothed smile. Chloe, my granddaughter who loved to braid my hair. They aren't your grandkids anymore. Jason yelled, his voice tearing at his throat. "I will tell them you died. I will tell them you hated them. You will die alone, old woman. You will die without ever holding them again." It was a dagger, a sharp poisoned blade aimed directly at the softest part of my soul. I swayed, my vision blurred, to never see them again, to let them grow up thinking I abandoned them. It was a fate worse than death. It was the only weapon he had left, and he was twisting it. Tasha joined in, screaming from the doorway. "We're changing their numbers. We're moving. You'll never find us." Arthur caught me, his arm wrapped around my waist, holding me up. He was solid, warm. "Let them talk," Arthur whispered in my ear. "Fear is loud, Ellie. Power is quiet." I looked at my son one last time. He looked deranged. Screaming threats in the doorway of a church. "Get him out," I whispered. Marcus nodded even from 50 yards away. He gave a final shove. Jason stumbled out into the sunlight. Tasha followed, shrieking obscenities. The rest of the vipers scurried out behind them, and then the doors began to close, slowly, heavily. I watched the sliver of sunlight narrow. I watched my son's silhouette vanish. Boom, the doors slammed shut. The sound was like a gavel striking the final judgment. The latch clicked into place. Clunk. The silence that rushed back into the room was heavy. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Miles, Chloe, Miles, Chloe. I felt sick. Had I done the right thing? Was my dignity worth losing my grandchildren? The guests were motionless. They were waiting to see if the bride would collapse. I took a breath. It shuddered in my chest. Arthur turned to me. He took both my hands in his. He looked into my eyes, and for the first time I saw something else in his expression. It wasn't just love. It was authority. He wasn't looking at me like a retired construction worker anymore. He was looking at me like a general surveying a battlefield. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo. He pulled out a phone, not his old cracked smartphone. This was a sleek black device. It looked military. He pressed a single button. "Arthur," I asked, confused. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer me immediately. He brought the phone to his ear. His eyes were fixed on the closed doors where my son had just disappeared. "It's done," Arthur said into the phone. His voice was different, deeper, colder. "They are leaving the premises now." He paused, listening to a voice on the other end. "Oh," Arthur said. "Initiate phase 2. I want eyes on the children immediately." My head snapped up. The children. Arthur hung up the phone. He slipped it back into his pocket. He turned to me and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "He threatened the wrong thing, Ellie," Arthur said softly. "He thinks he can hide my grandchildren from me." He shook his head. "He doesn't know that I own the building he lives in." The murmur in the crowd started again, but this time it was confused. "Arthur," I whispered, my hands trembling. "What are you talking about?" You own an apartment." Arthur laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was a tired laugh. "Honey," he said, reaching up to wipe a tear from my cheek with his thumb, "I don't own an apartment." From outside the thick stone walls of the cathedral, a new sound began to emerge. It started as a low thrumming. THW up dash, THW up dash, THW up. It grew louder and louder, until the stained glass windows began to rattle in their frames. The wind outside picked up. We could hear the roar of an engine, a massive engine. "I own the skyline," Arthur whispered. He looked at the priest. "Father," Arthur said, his voice commanding the room, "please finish the ceremony. My helicopter is waiting on the lawn, and my wife has had a very long day." The roar of the helicopter. Blades outside was deafening. Thwop, thwop, THW up. It shook the dust from the high rafters of the cathedral. It vibrated in the fillings of my teeth, but the loudest sound in the room was the silence between Arthur and me. I stared at him. I looked at the man I had coffee with every Tuesday for 6 months. I looked at the man who helped me clip 50-cent coupons for laundry detergent. I looked at the man wearing a suit that smelled of strangers. "Arthur," I whispered. My voice was trembling. "What did you say?" He didn't let go of my hands. If anything, his grip tightened. His palms were no longer sweating. They were dry, steady. "I said I own the skyline, Ellie," he replied. His voice was calm. It was the calm of a man who has nothing to prove. "I don't understand," I stammered. "The apartment, the old car, the shoes, I looked down at his scuffed shoes again. The ones my son had just mocked. The ones covered in dried champagne. Arthur followed my gaze. He smiled. A small, secretive smile. "Comfortable shoes," he said. "Hard to find." He pulled me closer. The guests were murmuring again, a low tide of confusion washing over the pews. The priest was looking out the window at the landing aircraft, clutching his rosary beads. "Ellie, listen to me," Arthur said. He looked deep into my eyes. "My name is Arthur. That is true. But my last name? It isn't Smith," he paused. "It's Vance." The air left my lungs. Vance. The name hit me like a physical blow. Vance, as in the Vance Tower downtown. As in the Vance Hospital wing. As in Vance Development Group. The company that built half the city. I had cleaned floors in a Vance building once. I had scrubbed the marble until my knees bled. I had never seen the owner. No one had. He was a ghost. A recluse. Legend said he vanished 10 years ago. "You?" I gasped. "You are Elias Vance." "I am," he nodded. "But why?" Tears welled in my eyes. I felt a sudden sharp spike of betrayal. "Why did you lie to me? Why did you pretend to be poor? Was this a game? Was I just entertainment?" "No," Arthur said. The word was sharp, immediate. Never entertainment, Ellie. Survival. He reached into his pocket, the inner pocket of the tuxedo right over his heart. He pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. It looked old, worn. 10 years ago, my first wife died. Arthur said softly. When she got sick, suddenly everyone was my best friend. Cousins I hadn't seen in decades appeared at the hospital. Strangers sent letters asking for loans before the funeral was even over. He opened the notebook. It was full of names. Crossed out names. "They didn't see me," Arthur said, his voice breaking slightly. "They saw a checkbook. They saw a payday. When she died, I realized I was the poorest man on earth. I had billions, but I didn't have a single person who loved me for me." He looked at the guests. He looked at the empty seats where my son and his family had been sitting. So I disappeared, he said. I put on these shoes. I bought that old car. I moved into that apartment above the laundromat. I wanted to see if it was possible to find something real again. He turned back to me. His eyes were shining. And then he whispered, I met you. He touched my cheek. His thumb was rough. Real. You saw the man in the cracked shoes, Ellie. You saw the man who counted pennies. And you treated him like a king. You shared your sandwich with me. You knitted me a scarf. You defended me against your own son. He took a deep breath. That wasn't a lie, Ellie. That was the only truth I have left. I looked at him. I really looked at him. The betrayal in my chest evaporated. It was replaced by something else. He had tested me. Yes, he had tested the world, and the world had failed him, but I hadn't. The money, I whispered. Is it? Is it real? Arthur didn't speak. He reached into his pocket again. He pulled out the black phone. He tapped the screen twice. He held it up for me to see. It was a banking app. A simple blue interface stopped my eyes focused on the number. It didn't look like a number. It looked like a phone number. It looked like a coordinate. There was a 2, then a, comma, dot, then 3 zeros, dot, another, comma, dot, 3 more zeros, another comma, 3 more zeros. RCE2. $1 billion. The screen was bright, cold. The numbers were motionless, staring back at me with the weight of empires. Liquid assets, Arthur said casually. Real estate holdings are ... separate. My knees gave out. Arthur caught me. He held me tight against his chest. I could hear his heart beating, thump, thump, thump. It was the same heartbeat I had listened to when we watched old movies on his sagging couch. You're a billionaire, I mumbled into his lapel. I married a billionaire. You married a man who loves you, he corrected. The money is just ... a tool. A tool we are going to use. He looked toward the church doors again. The doors that were currently hiding my son from the truth. Jason, Arthur said. The name was heavy on his tongue. He called me a beggar. He called me a parasite. Arthur put the phone away. He smoothed his jacket. He thinks he destroyed me today, Arthur said. He thinks he humiliated a helpless old man. Arthur's eyes hardened. The gentle retiree was gone. The titan of industry was back. He is about to find out that he just declared war on the darkest money in the city. Arthur turned to the priest. Father, he said, please pronounce us husband and wife. I have work to do, the priest stammered. He rushed through the final blessing. I now pronounce you man and wife. Arthur finished for him. He kissed me. It wasn't a gentle peck. It was fierce, possessive. It was a promise. He pulled back. Nah, Arthur said, taking my arm. Let's go to the helicopter. I believe your son has a loan coming due on Monday. He checked his watch. The cracked leather strap was gone. In its place, he pulled a platinum timepiece from his pocket. And I just bought the bank. The fall didn't happen overnight. But it felt like it. When you build a life on credit cards and arrogance, the collapse is never quiet. It is loud, it is messy. And for Jason, it started 48 hours after the wedding. It was a Tuesday morning. The sky was gray. A low, drizzling rain was slicking the streets of the suburbs. Jason was standing in his driveway. He was wearing his silk robe. He was holding a mug of coffee. That cost $12 a pound. He was watching a man in a neon yellow vest attach a hook to the bumper of his Porsche. Clank. Grind. The sound of metal on metal was brutal. Hey, Jason shouted. He spilled his coffee. It burned his hand. What do you think you're doing? That's a $100,000 car. The repo man didn't look up. He was chewing gum, smack, smack. He just kept cranking the winch. Bank sent the order, buddy, the man grunted. Payments for months overdue. She's going to the yard for months. Jason stammered. There must be a mistake. My mother. She usually handles the ... She transfers the... He stopped, he realized, standing there in the cold rain. That the bank of Mom was closed. Permanently. The Porsche lifted off the ground. Its tires spun helplessly in the air. It looked like a dead beetle. Jason ran to the driver's side window. Wait, my golf clubs are in there. My laptop. You can pick 'em up at the impound lot, the man said, climbing into the tow truck. Bring cash. We don't take credit from guys with your score. The truck rumbled away. The Porsche disappeared around the corner. Jason was left standing on the wet asphalt. His socks were soaked. He was shivering, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the freeze inside his house. He walked back inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet, Tasha. He called out, no answer. He walked into the living room. The white leather sofa was gone. The 6-inch television was gone. The Persian rug was gone. The room echoed. It smelled of dust and emptiness. Tasha. Panic rose in his throat. It tasted like bile. He ran up the stairs. He burst into the master bedroom. The closet doors were open. It looked like a bomb had gone off. Wire hangers were scattered on the floor. Empty shoeboxes were piled in the corner. Her side of the closet was bare. Not a dress. Not a shoe. Not a single designer bag. She had taken everything on the nightstand. Where she used to keep a picture of them on their honeymoon, there was a piece of paper. A yellow sticky note. Jason picked it up. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. I'm going to my mother's, it read. The handwriting was jagged, hushed. Don't follow us. The lawyer will call you. Pess, you're broke. Jason, and I don't do broke. He crumpled the note. He threw it at the wall. You coward! He screamed. You leech! But there was no one to hear him. Just the empty walls of a house he couldn't afford. His phone buzzed in his pocket. BZZZT. BZZZT. He pulled it out. It was a notification from his bank. Alert, transaction declined. Insufficient funds. Alert, account frozen by creditor. Alert, mortgage payment failed. The screen lit up with red warnings. It was a digital hemorrhage. His life was bleeding out, 1 0 at a time. He sank to the floor. The carpet was rough against his skin. He put his head in his hands. He had no car. He had no wife. He had no money, and worst of all, he knew exactly who was behind it. He remembered the helicopter. He remembered the look in Arthur's eyes. Arthur hadn't just bought the bank. He had bought the debt. He had bought the mortgage. He had bought every single financial chain that held Jason's life together. And he had pulled them all tight at once. Jason crawled to the window. He looked out at the gray, rainy street. A black sedan was parked across the road. The windows were tinted. It had been there all morning. Jason squinted. The window rolled down just an inch. He saw a flash of silver hair. He saw a pair of eyes watching him. It was Arthur. He wasn't doing anything. He was just watching. Jason grabbed his phone. He dialed my number. His fingers were frantic. Tap, tap, tap. Pick up, Mom, he whispered. Please, pick up. I'm sorry. I'll say anything. Just pick up. Ring, ring, ring. The number you have dialed has been disconnected, a robotic voice said. Please check the number and try again. Disconnected. He dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a crack. He was alone. Truly, completely alone. And then a new notification pinged on the cracked screen. It wasn't from the bank. It was a text message. From an unknown number, he picked it up. Meet me at the diner on 4th Street. Come alone. We have a proposition. Jason stared at the message. A proposition from who? He didn't know it was a trap. He didn't know that the shark in the water wasn't Arthur. It was something much worse. They say a shark can smell a single drop of blood in the water from a mile away. My son didn't smell blood. He smelled a bank transfer. It was 3 days after the wedding. 3 days after the helicopter lifted us out of the chaos and dropped us into paradise. Arthur had taken me to his private island. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the ocean against the white sand. I was sitting on the terrace, a glass of iced tea in my hand. Arthur was reading a book beside me, his hand resting warmly on my knee. For the first time in 20 years, my shoulders weren't tight. My stomach wasn't in knots. I was at peace. And then the phone buzzed. BZZZT. It was a harsh mechanical sound. An intrusion. A mosquito in the bedroom. It was lying face down on the glass table. I saw Arthur stiffen. He didn't look up from his book, but his hand stopped moving on my knee. He knew. I picked it up. The screen was bright. Too bright against the soft twilight. One new message. From Jason. My heart did a traitorous little flip. The mother in me, the part of me I thought I had killed in the church, woke up. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe he's sorry. Maybe he realized what he lost. I unlocked the phone. Mom, the text read. I know things got heated at the wedding. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking. I miss you. I stared at the words. Heated. He called my husband trash. He poured wine on my dress. He tried to destroy me. And he called it heated. Don't reply, Arthur said softly. He closed his book. Keep reading. I scrolled down. There was a second message. Sent 1 minute later. Tasha left me. Mom, she took the kids. I'm all alone in this big house. It's so quiet. I keep thinking about when I was little, and you used to make me grilled cheese when I was sad. I need my mom. A lump formed in my throat. It tasted like ash. He was playing the nostalgia card. He was using the memory of the boy he used to be to manipulate the woman I was now. And then the third message. The photo. It was a picture of Miles and Chloe, my grandbabies. They were holding a clumsy hand-drawn sign. We love Grandma. He's using them, I whispered, feeling sick. Arthur, he's using the children. Look at the timestamp on the photo, Ellie, Arthur said. His voice was clinical. Cold. I checked the details. The photo was taken 6 months ago. Before the wedding, before the fight. Before everything, he hadn't just taken a picture of them missing me. He had dug through his archives to find a prop. He was using their innocent faces as emotional currency. Then came the fourth message. The real reason for the text. I'm in trouble, Mom. Real trouble. Tasha cleared the accounts. The sharks are circling. I need a loan. Just until I get back on my feet. I know Arthur has it. I know who he is now. Please. Family helps family. I scrolled to the bottom. $500,000. That's all I need to make the bad men go. Away. $500,000. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I was happy. He didn't apologize to Arthur. He just sent a number. It's not an apology, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and grief. It's an invoice. Arthur stood up. He walked to the edge of the balcony, looking out at the dark ocean. He knows, Arthur said. He knows I'm worth billions. And now he thinks he hit the lottery. He says he's in danger. I said, reading the text again. He says bad men are after him. Arthur turned back to me. His face was grim. Isn't lying about that part, Ellie? My investigators found his debt ledger. He owes money to a loan shark named Vinny the Vice Moretti. $2 million. Gambling debts. Failed investments. My blood ran cold. Loan sharks. Will they? Will they hurt him? They might, Arthur admitted. If he doesn't pay. Then we have to help him. The panic flared in my chest. Arthur, I can't let them hurt him. He's my son. Arthur walked back to me. He took the phone from my hand. He placed it gently on the table face down. Ellie, he said, if we pay this debt, what does Jason learn? That he's safe, I pleaded. No, Arthur shook his head. He learns that he can gamble his life away, treat you like garbage, humiliate us in public, ... And Mommy will still write a check. He gripped my shoulders. He learns that there are no consequences. And a man who believes there are no consequences is dangerous. Not just to himself, but to everyone around him. I looked at the phone. It buzzed again. Message 5. Don't ignore me, Mom. If I don't get that money by Friday, I can't guarantee I'll be around to see Miles graduate. Do you want that on your conscience? Emotional blackmail. Pure and simple. He is holding a gun to his own head, Arthur said, and he is blaming you for the trigger. So what do? I asked. Do we just let him drown? Arthur looked at the ocean. The water was black as ink. No, Arthur said. We don't let him drown. He picked up his own phone. He dialed a number. But we don't send a lifeboat either. Arthur's eyes were hard. We send a lesson. He put the phone to his ear. Marcus, Arthur said, locate the loan shark. Locate Moretti. I want to buy the debt. My eyes widened. You're paying it. Arthur covered the microphone. I'm not paying it for him, Ellie, Arthur whispered. I'm buying it. Which means he doesn't owe the shark anymore. He smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Now he owes me. There is a specific kind of silence that happens when a mother decides to let her child fall. It isn't peaceful. It is deafening. It screams against your ribs. It tears at the very biology that commands you to protect your offspring at all costs. I stood in the doorway of Jason's new apartment. If you could call it that, it was a studio on the wrong side of the tracks. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage, damp drywall, and old regrets. The carpet was sticky. The light bulb overhead flickered with a nervous, buzzing rhythm. BZZZT. BZZZT. Jason was sitting on a mattress on the floor. He didn't have a bed frame. He didn't have sheets. He was wrapped in a gray blanket that looked like it had been stolen from a motel. He looked terrible. His Italian haircut had grown out, shaggy and unkempt. His face was covered in stubble. He had lost weight. His cheekbones were sharp, jutting out like cliffs. When he saw me, he didn't stand up. He couldn't. He just scrambled forward on his knees. He rasped. His voice was thin, brittle. T, you came. I knew you would come. He looked at my purse. His eyes locked onto it with the desperation of a starving man looking at a loaf of bread. Did you bring it? He asked. Did you bring the check? I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised. I remembered him as a toddler, scraping his knee on the pavement. I remembered how I used to run to him, pick him up, kiss the wound, and buy him ice cream to stop the tears. I realized in that moment that the ice cream had been a mistake. I had spent 30 years cushioning his falls. I had spent 30 years clearing the path so he would never stub his toe. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was loving him, but I wasn't. I was crippling him. By never letting him struggle, I had stolen his strength. By never letting him fail, I had ensured he would never succeed. I reached into my purse. Jason's eyes lit up. He held out his shaking hands. Thank God. Thank God. I promise, Mom, I'll pay you back. I just need to clear this debt and then I pulled my hand out. It was empty. Jason froze. He looked at my empty palm. Then he looked at my face. Mom, he whispered, where is the check? There is no check, Jason, I said. The words hung in the stale air, heavy, absolute. What? He choked out. But the bad men, Moretti. He's going to break my legs, Mom. He sent me a picture of a baseball bat. You can't just let that happen. I can, I said. My voice trembled, but I forced it to steady. And I will. You're killing me. He screamed. He slammed his fist into the dirty mattress. You are killing your own son over money. No, I replied softly. I am saving you. I walked over to the window. It was cracked, taped over with cardboard. I looked out at the alleyway below. For 38 years, Jason, I have been your safety net, I said, not looking at him. Every time you messed up, I wrote a check. Every time you fell, I caught you. I turned back to him. And look at you. I gestured to the squalid room. You are a 38-year-old man who doesn't know how to survive. You treat people like objects because you think people are disposable. You think money solves everything because money has always solved everything for you. I took a step closer. If I write that check today, Jason, I save your legs, yes. but I lose your soul. I don't care about my soul. He sobbed. I care about not dying. You won't die, I said. I knew this because Arthur had already neutralized the threat. Moretti wasn't coming. But Jason couldn't know that. He needed the fear. He needed the fire. But you will suffer. And for the first time in your life, you are going to handle it alone. You hate me, he whispered. You hate me because of the wedding. I love you, I corrected. Tears finally spilled over my cheeks. Hot, painful. I love you enough to let you hate me. I love you enough to stand here and watch you break, because I know that is the only way you will ever put yourself back together. I walked to the door. Every step was agony. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn around to write the check to fix it. But I kept walking. Mom, he wailed. Mom, please. Don't leave me here. I stopped at the threshold. I didn't turn back. The rent is due on the 1st, Jason, I said. I suggest you get a job. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to him cry. It was a guttural, ugly sound. The sound of a child realizing that the nursery is closed. I leaned my forehead against the peeling wallpaper and wept. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. It felt cruel. It felt unnatural. But as I walked down the stairs, leaving my son in the wreckage of his own making, I knew it was the only gift I had left to give him. I had given him life once. Now, I had to let him learn how to live it, but I didn't know if he would survive the lesson. I didn't know that rock bottom had a basement. And Jason was about to find the trap door. 3 years. That is how long it takes for a forest to grow back after a fire. The scorched earth heals slowly. The black ash eventually turns into green shoots. I was sitting on the back porch of our beach house. The air smelled of salt and hickory smoke. Arthur was at the grill, flipping burgers with the same focus he used to dismantle corporate mergers. He was wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook." He looked ridiculous. He looked perfect. The screen door creaked open. Squeak. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel that old knot of anxiety in my stomach. I looked up. Jason walked out. He looked different. The soft, doughy arrogance of his face was gone. It had been carved away by hard work. His skin was tanned, weathered by the sun. There were fine lines around his eyes. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing a flannel shirt with a frayed collar and jeans, stained with motor oil. He didn't smell like $400 cologne anymore. He smelled of sawdust and honest sweat. He was working as a foreman for a small construction crew. He woke up at 5 in the morning. He came home with aching muscles. He paid his rent on time. He was tired. But he was real. He walked over to the cooler. He pulled out 2 sodas. The ice clinked, clink, clink. He walked over to the grill. I held my breath. Just for a second. The memory of the wedding toast, the trash comments, still echoed in the back of my mind sometimes. Trauma leaves a ghost. But Jason didn't sneer. He didn't mock Dot. He stood next to Arthur. He stood next to the billionaire who could buy the entire construction company Jason worked for with pocket change. "Hey, Arthur," Jason said. His voice was deeper now, grounded. "Do you need a hand with those?" "I think I've got it, son," Arthur smiled. He didn't look up from the patties. "But you can grab the plates." Jason grabbed the stack of paper plates. He didn't complain that they weren't china. He didn't complain that he was doing a chore. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the ocean. "I have a question," Jason said. Arthur flipped a burger. The grease sizzled on the coals. "Hiss. Ask away." "I have a guy on my crew," Jason said. "Young kid, 19. He messed up big time today. Dropped a load of lumber. Cost us a day's work." Jason took a sip of his soda. "I wanted to fire him," Jason admitted. "My boss told me to fire him. I watched them. The billionaire and the mechanic." "What did you do?" Arthur asked. "I remembered something you told me," Jason said. He looked at Arthur's shoes. "They were sandals today. You told me that everyone deserves a chance to fix what they broke, but only if they pick up the broom themselves." Arthur nodded slowly. "So I didn't fire him," Jason said. "I handed him a shovel. I told him we stay late until it's cleaned up. And I stayed with him. Arthur turned. He wiped his hands on his apron. He looked at my son with a pride that money cannot buy. That, Arthur said, is leadership. It's just work. Jason shrugged. But he was smiling. He looked at me then. His eyes were clear. The greed was gone. The desperation was gone. Thanks, Mom, he said softly. For what? I asked. For not writing the check, he said. For letting me drown. He looked at his rough, calloused hands. I almost didn't make it, but I like who I am now. I sleep better on a mattress I paid for than I ever did in that big house. Miles and Chloe ran onto the deck then, screaming and laughing, dripping wet from the pool. They bypassed me. They bypassed Jason. They ran straight to Arthur. Grandpa. Grandpa. They yelled, hugging his legs. Jason didn't flinch. He didn't get jealous. He watched his children hug the man he once called trash. He watched them hug the man who had silently, secretly ensured Jason didn't get killed by loan sharks 3 years ago. A secret Arthur had never told him. A debt Jason could never repay. Jason looked at Arthur. Dad, Jason said. It was the first time he had used the word. Burgers are ready. We sat down to eat on plastic chairs. The food was simple. The conversation was easy. I looked at my family. The billionaire who pretended to be poor to find love. The son who had to lose everything to find himself. And I realized something. Arthur's billions were in a trust fund. They were numbers on a screen. Cold, abstract dot, but the legacy sitting at this table. The respect in my son's eyes. The love in my husband's smile. The dignity of a hard day's work. That was the real gold dot, and unlike the money, no one could ever steal it from us. I took a bite of my burger. It tasted like victory dot, because in the end, the matriarch's will wasn't a document lawyers fought over. It was the will to say no to the son I loved, so that he could finally become the man he was meant to be. And that dot dot is a wealth beyond measure.